Chronic Illness Therapist podcast. This is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learn here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. Tyler Orr is a licensed professional counselor out of the state of Tennessee. He's an MDRIA-approved consultant and the creator of Constructed Awareness, and he offers an interactive here-and-now approach to counseling, consulting, and teaching that integrates mindfulness, nonviolence, non-duality, EMDR, and body-centered therapy techniques. I'm excited to interview Tyler today as his training had a really big impact on me as a therapist. Going through Constructed Awareness really demystified mind-body therapies and really helped me build confidence in being able to bring mind-body techniques to clients with chronic pain. Mindfulness and acceptance get an awfully bad rap in the chronic pain community, and for good reason. Historically, the mental health field has made a lot of us feel like we're making our pain up or we're not trying hard enough when we can't just will it away. So I hope this conversation with Tyler will help explain some of the really important nuances that this topic often overlooks. And just keep in mind that there are really small, minute nuances here. It's not a clear, cut and dry conversation. So listen carefully, and if you're left with any questions at the end, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm more than happy to talk with you. Hi, Tyler. Welcome.
Thanks for talking today.
So tell me then, what got you started in working with chronic pain, and just give us a little background about your approach to working with chronic pain and chronic illness.
Well, my first training I ever did when I was still in grad school was a hypnosis training. And there was like at the end of the last day, it was a 2-day training, like the very end, there's like this 20-minute module on treating chronic pain with hypnotherapy. And, at this point, I can't tell you anything that they taught about how to work with chronic pain. The takeaway for me was like, wow, is this something I could actually work with? Because I thought for sure, like, this is what doctors worked with, or PTs, massage therapists, people like that, but not a mental health practitioner. So that really stuck with me, and I was excited about that idea because of like personal experiences with chronic pain. My grandmother had rheumatoid arthritis and passed away as a result of complications with that. And my wife and myself both have chronic pain. Well, we had. I don't think I could say that I have it anymore. I have occasional pain, but nothing in a chronic way. So that was really exciting. And I kind of held on to that. I didn't work with pain for a long time until I met a guy named Dr. Matt McClanahan in Chattanooga. He's a DO physician who works almost exclusively with pain. His private practice is exclusively pain. And he just comes at it from such a unique way. It's not like the pain is a tissue problem. He was coming at it more like it could have more of an emotional root. And he taught a lot about pain science, and met another guy named Jason Terrian. He's a PT in Chattanooga. He works the same way. So we got together and, well, first of all, Matt just started sending me clients because I was interested in it. I didn't know much about it at the time, but was at least interested in it. And he really liked to refer patients out to therapists. And so I started working with pain a lot more just kind of overnight, because I was like pretty much straight out of school, didn't have any clients at the time. He kind of filled me up fast. So I owe him a lot on a lot of different levels. But as that was happening, I'm working with a lot of his patients. We just started to talk more, and I started to learn more about pain. I met Jason, the PT. We started going around teaching workshops along with a meditation teacher that we knew. We called it Pain Matters. And we went around different places teaching that, mostly in Chattanooga, but a few places outside that. And then me, Matt, and Jason started a business for a while that has dissolved since. But it's called Insight Pain Institute, and our goal was to just teach workshops and to develop, educational material for larger groups and practices. And we went around and taught workshops with that. And so by the time all of that as I'm hanging out with them and we're teaching together, I just kept learning things and things begin to click. Like it took me some, the whole idea that the pain comes from the brain and not the body, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That didn't click for me for probably a year into teaching with these guys. And so I always kind of kept that in mind. This can be hard for clients to get as a concept because I was teaching it for almost a year before it really kind of made sense to me. So that helped me be patient working with people. So yeah, and then I got to the point where I was just, for a year or two, that's all I worked with was chronic pain. And and then eventually I started teaching EMDR trainings on chronic pain. And but then about last year, December, about a year and a half ago, I stopped teaching EMDR to work with constructed awareness. And so I haven't taught that pain training since.
Well, I got lucky in getting one of your last trainings then in 2020. That was really pivotal. I don't remember exactly what you called it, but I remember emailing you like, I'm not an EMDR therapist, but can I take this training? And you're like, yeah, everything still applies. And it really did. And it does. And I can relate to when you're saying you were teaching it, but not really understanding. It hadn't clicked yet.
Like where pain comes from and how it's not all in your head, but at the same time, it is coming from your brain.
Can you speak a little more to that? How do you help clients understand that?
Well, I remember I wrote a blog for my website on pain, and I sent it to Matt to proofread. And he was like, I said something about pain in the body, and he was like, he wrote back, that's not right. And I was like, oh my God. Like it just like the planets and the stars aligned at that moment. It's like, okay, I get it. Now it makes sense. And I guess can I just talk kind of the way that they taught me?
Sure.
And this is sort of how I talk to clients. So if you go to the doctor with a runny nose, the doctor, like I say, the doctor knows that like that's a symptom of something deeper that's going on in your system. They're not going to say that the problem is your nose.
Right.
They're not going to say, that you need like nose surgery. We need to fuse your sinuses or whatever, like they do vertebrae. They know that that's just a symptom. And like any doctor that's worth their weight would know that. But when it comes to like chronic pain, the medical profession, and I think really our society in general, looks at it completely different. It's like if your back hurts, that means there's something wrong with your back. And they don't go any deeper into exploring what that could be. And what I've learned and what research is showing, that the thing that's at the root of it, the thing that's causing the symptom of pain, a lot of times it is an emotional component. It's an early attachment disruption. A lot of times is what I find that it is. So in our line of work, that's what we work with. So if that's true, if that's the case, then that's great, because that then puts chronic pain into the scope of our practice. It all goes back to the guy, Rene Descartes.
I don't know.
He's the guy the philosopher that said, I think, therefore I am.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was a philosopher and he's also a scientist. And he had a lot of talents. But this, back in his day, it was like the first time that in history that it was legal, I guess you could say, to dissect cadavers. Before that, the church wouldn't allow it. It was immoral or sin or illegal or whatever. But he and his colleagues were some of the first people to like openly dissect cadavers for scientific purposes. And they found these white strands that ran through the body. We'd call them nerves, but he referred to them back then as pain tubes. And there's this kind of famous, it's famous, at least in the pain world, it's not famous for most people, but there's this little cartoon illustration that he drew of this naked man. I'm not sure why he had to be naked, but he is, and his foot is in the fire. There's like a little fire pit, his foot's in there. And the idea, this was the Cartesian model of pain. The idea is that the guy's foot's being damaged by the fire. Pain happens in the foot as a result of it. And then the pain signal shoots up the pain tube and goes to the brain, where the person recognizes that there's pain in the foot. So then they can move their foot out. This totally sounds right. This is how we think about pain, but it's actually totally wrong based off what we're learning from current neuroscience. And I'll warn you, Matt and Jason, the guys I presented with, they're the neuroscientists. I'm not. So as you know, I'll talk about the brain, and that's about as deep as I get with neuroscience. So
That's fair.
so forgive me.
No.
Like I say, I've been to dozens of trainings where they teach like what the amygdala does, and I still don't know. So I don't get into it. But what we know, what's right about how pain happens is, okay, the same example, the guy's foot's being burned in the fire. There is nothing in the tissue of the foot that can create pain. There's only receptors that detect what's happening inside the foot and on the outside of the foot. And so when the tissue there is being damaged, there's no pain that happens in the foot. There's only receptors and so those receptors detect, okay, yeah, there is potential damage happening in the foot. So those receptors send a signal, not a pain signal, because there's no pain yet in the process, but it's like an alarm signal. And it's like an alarm that says, hey, there's potential damage here. So that goes up the nerve to the brain. The brain processes that information and determines, yes, damage is being done and special attention needs to occur. The brain doesn't send pain down to the foot. There is no downflow to pain. There's like a motor signal that goes down that motivates the guy to move his foot, but there's no downflow to pain. In this whole process we're talking about, there actually is never pain that happens in the foot. Right. What actually happens is the person's brain projects the experience of pain into his consciousness. He projects it into his awareness that's associated with his foot. So this is how something like phantom limb pain can happen. So imagine that guy's foot burned off, or they had to amputate it because of the damage. You know, but he feels pain where his foot used to be. Well, there's no tissue there at all. Like right away, that rules out that pain's coming from the tissue of the body. Right. So there's no tissue there for it to hurt. What's happening is the person's experiencing it in his consciousness that was associated with his foot.
It's fascinating, and I think even when you explain it in very clear and easy terms to logically understand, our emotions still get wrapped up. A lot of us have heard, you know, it's all in your head, you're making it up. That all starts to come up. But what I'm really hearing is like the work that you do, that we do in the therapy room, is not about helping someone say this doesn't hurt. Can you maybe even speak to, you could talk about constructed awareness, and that's your approach to therapy, and how the different parts of that process help the receptors themselves not turn your body on fire. You know, when you start to have an experience that typically causes you pain.
Yeah. Well, you said like it's all in your head. It's all in your brain.
Right.
So technically your brain, you know, most of it, I guess, is in the head. So in that sense, yeah, but like, you know, what they're meaning is you're making it up, like it's not real pain. There's no such thing as real or unreal pain. It's just pain. You know, pain is completely a subjective experience. You know, like we don't have any way to measure pain scientifically other than a subjective scale of like, what's your pain 0 to 10?
Which is totally irrelevant, because
right.
What's one person's 10 to another?
That's right. You know, even like imaging, like MRIs and x-rays and stuff like that, you can measure like tissue pathology and inflammation, but that's not measuring pain. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you can experience tissue damage and have no pain, and you can have no tissue damage and have pain. So that's a big part of working with clients, because they'll say, but I've got my x-rays, I've got my MRIs, and it shows this bulge disc or whatever, you know? Yep. So that's another area where people kind of, if you can help people to separate the idea that like, that imaging shows pain. It doesn't show pain, right? It just shows tissue. And that's not where the pain's happening. The pain's not happening in the tissue, it's happening in the brain. Right. Right. So there's no guarantee that like that is actually what's causing the pain. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. So where do you go next? What do you do? How do you help clients move from that place of, I still don't understand why, like, okay, so how do I change my brain then? How do I change my thoughts? How do I change my experience? How do I work in that way? Where do you go next?
Good question. I guess the next move, because I don't have to get complete buy-in for, looking at pain this way. I don't think it's required, because at least a logical buy-in, because the part of the system that's creating the pain isn't the logical part. But it sure is useful to get a little bit of buy-in, at least from clients. So, but again, I'm not going to twist their arm to believe it like me. And one thing, like a side note, is usually I'm not the first person to call when somebody has pain.
Right.
Nobody's going to sprain their ankle and say, I want to call my counselor. They'll call me after, like, the ankle's healed and it's been 2 years and it's still hurting, and they've tried everything that's medical or holistic. And so usually by the time they get to me, there's enough of a desperateness that allows them to be a little bit open. I hate to say it that way, but I think that's just true. There's like this desperation where they're willing to try an idea like this, or to explore this. At least it opens up a whole new avenue of treatment that they haven't experienced before. And the cool thing about working like this is, I've had clients who, spent time at the Mayo Clinic, Vanderbilt, these big hospitals, and no success. And then they come in this little private practice office, and after a few months, they feel better. And that's because we're actually getting to the source of it, rather than just treating the symptoms, or being like really tunnel vision focused on, like, it must be something wrong with the tissue. Yeah.
I think I'm hearing several different aspects that could be, that probably all work in tandem together, but even just being curious and open, up until that point, it's, let me go to a doctor who's going to fix me. And you're kind of giving all of your power to some kind of external source and saying, like, you fix me. And while they may be coming to you with that too, your job is then to kind of put that back on them and say, well, actually, you have the power inside of you. There just hasn't been anybody to support you in figuring that out.
Right.
It sounds like that's what you do.
Yeah, totally. And just kind of help them, like, learn to be with their experience in a new way, and like how to, because like what I would, with somebody with chronic pain, what I'm typically, like, the treatment plan, I guess you could say, would be to find out, okay, if there is these, we mentioned before earlier, experiences that could be fueling this present experience of pain. We want to be able to process those, but I want to spend some time, like, getting them ready to do that. And that's where constructed awareness kicks in. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a level 2 for CA now, which is processing memories. So there's 2 phases of treatment. There's one is more the resourcing, like helping the client bring a deeper awareness to their experience, to connect with themselves in new ways. And then the second phase of treatment is the processing part. We call it reconstructing of those memories. And so, yeah, it's like, I'll explain to clients a lot. Imagine your nervous system's like a bucket. It's almost full of water. It doesn't take much of extra water for it to overflow. And when that overflows, the water that overflows is like, that's the symptoms. And that can be things like anxiety and panic attacks, depression, stuff that counselors usually work with. But it can also be like these chronic health and chronic pain disorders. And for a therapist who's listening to this and is interested in working with pain, if you could break that idea that those are 2 things, that there's mental health problems and physical problems, they're all just symptoms that are the result of a nervous system that's overwhelmed and can't handle it.
Makes
right.
perfect
And
sense.
so a lot of therapists just spend their time, like, cleaning up, like mopping up the water, and thinking that that's the best that we can do. But I'm more interested in, like, what's in the bucket. And the bucket's full of past experiences and, like, daily life stressors.
Yeah.
But you can use your normal way of doing things to approach the life stressors. But it's really useful to have some sort of process-oriented approach, like EMDR, like somatic experiencing, or constructed awareness, to empty the bucket so that their system can handle more without the symptoms occurring.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. I can see how it still is just something so hard to wrap your head around, because it's just complete. It's so different than anything we've been trained in as therapists, as doctors. Like, the mental or the physical, which they're just one thing. But even as we talk about it, we still have to separate it, because that's how our system works. It's like, go to a physical health doctor, you go to a mental health professional.
That's right.
And so, yeah, we're trying to blend the two. And it's hard.
They're all just symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, like I kind of first realized this because I would work with, like, say somebody came in with anger issues or panic attacks or something, but they also had neck pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would work on the anxiety or whatever it is that we're working on, and all of a sudden their neck pain would get better too. And so that's what's led me to theorize that, like, what if in that, in those cases, what if both of the symptoms were coming from the same source?
Yes. Yeah.
What if the physical isn't any different than the emotional problem? Yeah. So that's the big thing. Yeah. Just let that go, and you can work with chronic pain.
Yep. Yeah. Cause I think that answers the question too, kind of like, what do you say to a therapist who's like, well, that's out of my scope of practice, I can't touch that. And it's like, you're not telling them you're going to cure their neck pain, but in working with what we do work with, attachment and unprocessed memories and trauma, those things do start to resolve.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Because they're all symptoms. It's just like if you treat a virus, multiple symptoms can alleviate.
Right.
So once you treat the thing that's at the source, all the symptoms can change.
Yeah, I think about that with inflammation and people who have like several different diagnoses, especially stuff like POTS, that usually goes hand in hand with like Lyme disease. And so I'll have clients who have like several different diagnoses. And to me, it's all the same. It's all one, like it's one dysfunction in the body. And these are all just different symptoms that are coming up.
Yeah, I view that as a good sign, actually.
Say more about that.
When someone comes in with multiple symptoms like that, that's usually just like an indicator that it is a sensitization issue, that the nervous system is too sensitized, it's overwhelmed because of what's in the bucket. So for me, that's just, that tells me
we have work we can do there.
Yeah. I would rather that be the case personally, that if somebody just comes in with like one diagnosis or one symptom, because that might point it more toward it's like a tissue issue. Whenever you get like 4 or 5 different diagnoses, and it's because the doctors can't make sense of it, and they can't make sense of it because it's not a physical problem. They're just throwing labels at the person trying to make sense of it, when really it's just multiple symptoms springing off the same thing.
Yeah. And do you find in your work that you're working more with lots of developmental repetitive traumas, or are you looking at like one type of shock trauma?
Usually the first option. It's more attachment issues. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
think about it, because 2 people can have the same accident, same injury, and they heal different. How come? Well, even research shows that early life experiences, adverse life experiences, can definitely affect how we heal. They've done studies where they measure adverse childhood experiences for people who had surgeries to see if there was a connection between successful and unsuccessful surgeries. And it showed like if you had, I think 2 or more, I can't remember the exact numbers, but like 2 or more adverse childhood experience, that it drastically, like over 50% drops your success rate for surgery.
That's fascinating.
Right. And so, yeah, I think I put my money on the early attachment experiences when it comes to chronic pain.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Mm-hmm.
When you, so in level 1 of constructed awareness, how are you setting up the therapists who are getting trained by you? How are you setting them up to help them then help their clients?
Okay. Can I talk a little bit about CA?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like the easiest way to set it up that I found is just to talk about the 3 principles of it. So the first one is, if you bring awareness to something, it changes. The easy thing is to point out, it's like you're going to behave completely different when you're home alone than you would if you're in front of me or someone else. And that's because you're being observed. And like little kids behave differently when they're being watched versus when they're not. And I think our internal experience is the same way. Without awareness, without you watching it, your nervous system is just going to respond habitually, like on autopilot, right? And so that's why we find, I believe, ourselves doing the same things and the same experiences over and over and over again, because it's a lack of awareness of what's actually happening. And there's just countless examples that we see in reality. We just don't pay attention to it, of how awareness brings change. And, you know, we're taught growing up that if you work hard, you can get what you want.
Yep.
And that's like the American way. And a lot of our popular therapies in our field are focused on that. They like willpower to overcome emotion. That's the way I see like CBT and therapies like that, you know, where you come up with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's probably why so many of us still think, when we hear even this conversation, it's like, you're telling me to just like will the pain away.
that's right. Yeah. But that's like the medical model that we work in. It's like we're supposed to create these treatment plans, and we're supposed to do these things, and everything's supposed to be moving toward change. And but there's some things that just don't work for that. I think it's most things don't work for that. But a good example is like trying to force yourself to fall asleep.
Mhm.
Have you ever been able to fall asleep through willpower? Like nobody ever has, you know. What happens when you try to force yourself to fall asleep is you're fighting with sleep. And I think that's what happens emotionally for people. It's like if you're trying to fight the pain,
It's
you're
just
trying to force it away. Now you're just in a battle with it.
Yep.
You know, we could look at it that way. And so in CA, we don't really do any of that. You know, the goal is to actually create the least amount of resistance with a client as possible. And so instead of trying to like overpower the symptom, whether it's pain or whatever it is, we're not looking to change the client's experience. We're looking to bring a deeper awareness to their experience and allow the awareness itself to transform. Let the awareness itself bring about the change that the individual is looking for. You know, and people say, well, you know, you're all in your head, or you're doing this to yourself. Why in the world would they?
Yeah.
You know, our emotions, they're dictated by the autonomic branch of our nervous system, and so is pain, by the way. It's the automatic, the autonomous part of our nervous system. It's involuntary. And I'll tell clients this all the time, you know, I'll speak for myself. If I was actually in control of what I thought and felt, I would only think and feel great things. I would never feel bad again. Like I would be blissed out in euphoria every second of my life. I'd never have neck pain again.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I would only think positive, original thoughts. But that's not my experience. So part of what we talk about in CA, it's, do we actually have the control over our experience that we think we do? I think our internal world and our external world are just mirror images of each other. Things happen outside of us that are spontaneous and unpredictable. I think internally it's exactly the same way. But our parents have taught us that we can control it. They said things growing up like, don't be upset, don't worry, don't cry. And it gives us this impression that we can control what we feel and think. So then when we try it, especially if we go to a therapist that's like, let's come up with a plan to overcome this, and it doesn't work, right? Then you get double whammied with these thoughts like, well, I must be weak, I must be worthless. Why can't I control this? Mom said I could.
Yeah.
Right. And so I always tell people, if telling clients what they should think or feel worked, we wouldn't have clients, because their friends and families would have solved all their problems for them. So in CA, we don't put any effort into, I'll tell clients, like, I'll make a deal with you, I'll never tell you what to think or feel. Right. Because I'm more interested in what are you thinking and feeling, and bringing awareness to it on a deeper level and letting that change. So what are we changing, or what are we bringing awareness to? CA, the way we view it is that your entire conscious human experience is made of three things. It's thoughts that come to mind, sensations you feel in your body, and external senses. That these are the three building blocks of reality. And I don't know if you've chewed on that since the training you did, but
Yeah,
I've never experienced anything that wasn't one of those three things.
for sure.
It's wild to think we can boil it all down to that. So the third principle is that everyone's naturally more oriented to one of those three building blocks. So some people are more mentally oriented. Like I'm mentally oriented. I live in my head. I regulate myself through thought. I connect with other people through thought. I'm just driven by my mind. What were you? What was your orientation? Do you remember?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
Some people.
it's interesting as like because I brought so much awareness to my body and sensations and things of that nature, I was starting to get confused. Like maybe I am more sensation oriented, but no, when I'm in stress, mental mode all the way.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe second place for you, sensation. Right.
I think so. Yeah.
Which would mean that you're more cut off from your external, but we'll come back to that. We'll use you as a case example then.
Go for it.
The other people, like my wife, she's sensation oriented. So she's all about her body. Like she's in her feelings. She expresses herself in a much different way than me. Like she'll emote. When she's upset, her body will move. It might even like shake. There's big emotional expressions. When I'm upset, I'm all up in my mind because you're not getting much of a read from me physically. It's the opposite for her. There's a lot going on physically for her. She connects, with her body. She likes to be like close, likes, to touch and things like that. Some people are externally oriented, so they live outside of themselves. They're focused more on like reading the environment to figure out how they need to adapt themselves to meet the needs of the environment, or they're reading the environment to see who they need to take care of, right? So their focus is much more outward. It sounds like you, Destiny, your focus is way more internal, mind and body.
Even as you're explaining it again, I'm remembering how I struggled to type myself before too, because so like when I'm stressed, one, I'm all in my head and I want to like talk it out and I want to talk with somebody, but I'll start cleaning and I need my environment to be very like, I'm very focused on what it looks like around me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I might actually gravitate a little bit more towards that external.
So you'd be like MES.
Yeah.
Which is my type. Oh yeah, that's a good segue. So with constructed awareness, we got the three primary orientations: mind, body, external. So each type or each orientation has two different types associated with it. So there's one type that's more like hyper, like motivated, driven, forward moving, bigger energy. And then there's more like a hypo aroused. So it's like more of a stabilized, sometimes stuck, slower moving energy, because not everyone operates the same in the world. So if you got the three primary orientations and then two types for each one, that creates 6 orientation types. So I thought I remembered you as an MES. So I'm MES. So the M is for mental, E is for external, S is for sensation. And we put them together in order of the amount of time that you spend in that orientation. So for us, we spend most of our times in our mind, second place, our environment, least in our bodies. So MES. So that type is called achieving. So it's like really driven, mentally motivated. And then we could flip the S and the E. So then the hypo version for that is MSE. And we call that the thinking. So this is like the deep thinkers of the world. These people think just as hard as you and I, Destiny, but the problem is like they have a harder time, like, because they're E's in last place, they have a harder time like manifesting those ideas. And so it's harder for them to follow through. So what they end up doing is they end up just thinking really, really deeply. Right. This is my son's type, by the way. He's got a garage full of unfinished projects. He has more ideas than he can keep up with, and they're all brilliant, but he struggles to finish them. And then the external types, the hyper version is EMS. That's adapting. So these individuals, they read their environment to adapt themselves, or they adapt the environment to meet their own needs. So they're always sort of like manipulating either themselves or the things around them to regulate themselves. It's almost like if the environment's okay, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And then the other external type is ESM, giving. And so these individuals, they're reading their environment to see who they need to take care of.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a kind of a slower movement to them. This is my grandmother with rheumatoid. This is a really common type with chronic pain.
Okay.
By the way, there are certain personality traits that are common for people with chronic pain, and a lot of those you find in the giving type, because these are the people that put their own needs aside to help others. This is my grandmother through and through. Also my mom.
Constantly neglecting your own body, your own needs.
That's right.
Others are coming first, so of course your body's screaming out to you.
Yeah. And then we have the sensation type. So the first is the hyper is what we call feeling. So this is the deep feelers of the world. A lot of times, you hear people that are highly sensitive. I think people of other types can be highly sensitive persons, but this is common, really common for this type. It's like they just feel so much. And a lot of times that can be kind of overwhelming and hard to manage. And then the last one, SEM, which is trusting. So this is a real similar type to giving, but with this one, there's more like innocence, kind of gullibility. They just trust and go along because their mind's least, SEM. So they really struggle to use their own mind to bring meaning and rationale to what they're experiencing. So they tend to just reach out a lot to people and ask, like, what do you think? What should I do? These are the people that read books and listen to podcasts and like just they take in all this information to try to make sense of their internal experience.
Yeah. And I would imagine, just like other typologies, like the Enneagram or other personality things, you have several different like ones inside of you. You can have different traits of different pieces are all inside of you. So if you hear yourself in multiple of these, that's normal. It's just, when you actually get assessed by someone trained through constructed awareness, you'd have a better understanding of like, this is my main type.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, you feel like you kind of connect to all of them, and that's fine. And that's normal. It's actually a problem when someone's too fixed in one orientation style. I would say like, because we talk about when someone's in tune or dissonant, which is a different way of saying healthy and unhealthy, but it's like when you're in tune, all three building blocks are equal or closer to equal. So the person can like connect with the different parts of themselves, the full experience of themselves, of all three parts, and use them in ways that are like appropriate. It's not always appropriate to use my mind to solve a problem.
Right.
Sometimes it's better to use the environment. And so if I don't have the ability to connect with the environment, I'm going to be really limited. And that's example of like a dissonant state where you're just relying on just one, or the other style of dissonant would be fragmented, where there's no sense of center, where you're just bouncing from one building block to the next, kind of with no sense of control over it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, so you had mentioned there's three like philosophies as well in constructed awareness. The first one was awareness changes, awareness alone changes. What did you say the second one?
Yeah, it was the three building blocks that the
Okay.
whole human experience is made of, those three things.
Okay. And then number three, the philosophy would be
everyone's naturally more oriented to one of the three building blocks. And this is the reason that this is useful is because it, the first phase of treatment for CA is like resourcing. So this, if you understand their orientation, then that helps you understand like what kind of resources could be useful for them. So like I'm mentally oriented and I did therapy for years, but it was like cognitive therapy and it was helpful, but it wasn't really, you know what I mean? I didn't like learning much new stuff. Because it just bolstered up that part of me that I was really good at already. It wasn't until I got into the somatic therapies and like mindfulness approaches that focused on like external awareness, that's when the big shift started happening in my life. Because that's whenever, I felt like I was starting to tune up, I guess, to be in tune.
Yeah.
Because I was able to operate from a broader perspective rather than just one narrow way of doing things. And I first saw this when I was doing EMDR, and I'd wave my fingers and I'd say, "What are you noticing now?" And some people would just answer with all thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to like rationalize away their pain. Or sometimes I'd wave my fingers and I say, "What are you noticing now?" And then they'd they would say, like, where they would just have these big emotional expressions, and they would shake and cry and not say much. They couldn't access words very well. And sometimes I would, do a set of bilateral stimulation and say, what are you noticing now? And I could tell that they were like worried about me.
Mm-hmm.
They were editing themselves to make sure that I was comfortable.
Right.
They didn't want to be too much, or they're like, what are you noticing now? That sound machine in the hallway is just too loud. And I can't, so they're outside of themselves. And that's when I started to see, wow, this person is trying to fix it all. They're trying to do it all from this one narrow perspective. What would happen if I started to focus on resources that brought up the other two to a more equal level? And then when we did that and we got back into processing, I could say, what are you noticing now? And they could connect to their full experience rather than just that one part.
Getting yourself out of autopilot, bringing
Right.
intention into
Mm-hmm.
even into how you're processing, in therapy.
Yeah. And so you can build these resources around, okay, what's most developed, what's less developed, and then just focus more on what's less developed. So, and we do something in CA, call it tuning. And so you basically got the 3 building blocks. So we practice moving from one point of awareness to another point of awareness. So if the person's noticing a thought, we would connect with the thought. There's ways that we learn in the training, like how to really go deep into like understanding what a thought is and how to connect with it in a really like practical, almost like bottom up sort of way. So that they will connect with the thought for a while, and then, excuse me, and then invite them to shift their awareness to like their body. How's your body responding to that? And then we connect with the sensations, describe it in accurate, non-judgmental, non-violent sort of ways. And then we might go external and notice something in the room, connect with that for a while. And then we might go back into the body or back into the mind and just kind of do that over and over, because what we're doing is we're showing the client how the mind, the body, and the external environment all come together. There's this dance, there's this way that they influence each other, and they all come together in such a way that creates this experience that you would call now. And all of that is training the client to have a much broader perspective of themselves. And they're improving their ability to be aware of themselves. And that goes back to the first principle, because that awareness itself starts to change. And what I see in the work is, once a client connects on a deeper level, they just know what to do. I don't have to come up with a plan as a therapist to say, this is what we're going to do. They just start knowing what to do.
Yeah, that's something that I really liked about constructed awareness is it's such a beautiful blend of structure and open-endedness, so that you're giving the client complete autonomy to lead and do whatever it is they need to do in the session, but you're guiding them so they don't just come in kind of feeling like they're floundering. And that was my own experience within even somatic experiencing, which I am getting trained in. And I like it a lot. It's nothing against the approach at all, but even within my own somatic therapy, it just felt like I was floundering. And what I felt like I was paying my therapist to do was like, help me not flounder. You don't have to tell me what to do. You don't have to tell me like how to just feel good. That's not what I'm looking for, but I want to process these things, and I want to do the hard work. I need the teacher here to kind of guide me. And that's what I found in constructed awareness.
Awesome. Yeah, I did a year of SE training, and I felt like there was no structure. It felt that way to me. There were lots of times I'm like, am I even doing SE?
Yeah.
But then, my big background is in EMDR, which is a really intense structure, at least for phases 3 through 8, or 3 through 8. But, I was teaching EMDR trainings, and I remember the first training I ever taught. At the end of day 6, during the Q&A time, somebody raised their hand and said, "What's a resource?" And I was like, "Oh crap, I've messed up here." But after that, every training, no matter how hard I tried, there was so much confusion around phases 1 and 2, which is the history taking and resourcing. So actually CA was originally intended to be like an adjunct approach for EMDR as a way to put structure around phases 1 and 2. Because you got all the structure in phases 3 through 8 and then no structure for phases 1 and 2. So that's what it was originally, but as it developed, it just grew into something that wasn't EMDR. I couldn't even meet the definition of EMDR anymore. So I decided to go ahead and just let it be its own thing. But yeah, I'm saying that to say that was the intention. That is the intention. Like, how do we put structure around resourcing and history taking, but in such a way that it leaves a lot of freedom and wiggle room for the therapist to use their intuition and their gifts inside of that. So it works really well with EMDR.
Yeah.
Anybody here does the EMDR and you feel like, yeah, I don't really know how to do phases 1 and 2 really well, come see me.
Yeah.
Because it works great for that.
Or even somatic experiencing, because yes, I mean, we start talking about resourcing on day 1, and it's still something that sometimes I catch myself getting caught up in the vagueness of it. And I have to go back to my constructed awareness training to help me kind of bring that piece back in.
Cool. That's great. Mm-hmm.
And what about level 2? What does that entail?
That is processing memories. That's what the whole level 2 is about. So both level 1, level 2, they're both 4 days, 30 hours training. So level 2, we use that tuning technique that I mentioned before, going from mind, body to external, mind, body to external, as a way to kind of titrate the experience. So when we're working with a memory, the problem I have with EMDR is a lot of times it felt like you were just sort of like kicking the client into the deep end.
Mm.
You know, it's almost like you wanted to keep them as activated as possible to move through it. A lot of the research that I've done since I've stopped teaching is there's plenty of evidence that shows there's a big benefit to more like a graded approach. That's what SE does.
Yeah.
You know, the titration. And so we use the tuning as a way to kind of slow down keeps the client in sort of a Goldilocks zone of activation where it's not too much or too little. They're not overwhelmed or underwhelmed, because we're never staying in one place for too long. Like a lot of clients, like with EMDR, I found, what are you noticing now? It's too big of a question.
Yes.
So it's overwhelming.
Same with SE. It's too big.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what we do is we'll say, what do you notice with that thought? What do you notice about that thought? Tell me the colors you see. How far away is it? Do you see shapes?
Yeah.
You shift, like we just play around with all the different ways to connect with the thought. And then we'd move to, so when you notice that thought, how's your body responding? Where do you feel that sensation? What's its temperature? What's its shape?
Yeah.
What's its weight? And we might go back to the thought, or we might go external. We use a lot of like random objects in level 2, just on like toys and rocks and stuff like that to help connect. And that helps to enhance that dual awareness, you know, the ability to be here now while you're recalling the memory. So we don't want them reliving it. We don't want them to go too deep. We want to keep them as present as possible. That's actually what they found that all trauma therapies that are effective have in common. It's that dual awareness. That's why actually in EMDR, they don't call it BLS anymore. It's no longer bilateral stimulations. It's DAS, dual attention stimuli.
Oh, okay.
Even in Shapiro's book, the big book,
Mm-hmm.
last edition before she passed, there's one sentence in there that says that they're finding that the bilateral, the eye movements may actually have nothing to do with what's effective. It's all about the dual awareness, and the eye movements just help the person stay present.
There's similar research within the ACT framework. There was I cannot remember now where I read it, but they were looking at CBT versus ACT, and that even when CBT works, it's typically as a result of that client gained a level of true inner awareness, which could have happened through the relationship with the therapist, or just the client. You know, we can come to awareness on our own. We don't always need a therapist. So yeah, that was really interesting too. It's the awareness piece that makes all of these therapies work. And the way that I conceptualize that piece is like, when we're in a room with safe people, or we're in a safe environment, we can then be more aware. If you feel unsafe, or you feel like you have to be on guard, then you're not able to bring this level of awareness that's needed in order to start to.
You're going to retreat to the one domain, the one building block that you're really comfortable in. So if I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to go into my mind and I'm not going to connect with my environment, my body very well. But if I'm safe, I'll be able to.
Yep.
Right. So we're basically in CA and level 1, we're training clients to be able to do the processing from level 2 effectively. And a big part of it is like bringing in the attachment piece in level 2. We teach a technique called the attachment bridge, which is sort of a spinoff of the affect bridge. And so, and Shapiro, she took that. That's been around, that was around before her. I think she called it the affect scan. Is that right? Am I thinking about that?
I don't know.
The float back technique. It's a similar thing as that, but instead of like a lot of times with that, they'll connect with a sensation and float back from there
to their memory,
the previous time that you felt that way.
Okay.
What the attachment bridge does is, and we can tie this in with pain here. So you could say, like, so imagine you're with a client and they have like excruciating back pain, and that's what you're working on. So you could, when you're looking to find the memories to work with, you could ask, so when you're experiencing that pain, what do you want that you're not able to get? And a lot of times I started to realize, like, learn more about the attachment piece of this, because with chronic pain people, I usually get like a behavior or action as a response. They'd say like, well, I can't get in the floor and play with my grandkids anymore. So then I'd say, so when you can't get in the floor and play with your grandkids, what do you really want, like on a deep emotional level from the people you care about? And that's when I started to hear responses like, I just want to feel like I'm good enough, or something like that. So
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and so that's way different, because like when you're finding targets, you're looking for memories with pain. It's easy to like just focus on like when they had their accident or their surgery or something like that. I had chronic neck pain that started when I was about 20. Before that, there are no memories to work with for pain. But if I did the same thing and I said, when you're experiencing that neck pain, what do you want? I say something like, I just want to feel like I matter. Like that's what comes up. That's what's at the root of it.
Right.
And I could trace that back to before I could remember.
Yeah.
Experiences like that. So we're looking for an attachment longing that's not being met. I'm looking for a lack of safety, connection, support, or personal power. And that's the way that we would approach it. So instead of looking for memories of times you were in pain, we look for memories of times in your life that you wanted that attachment and you weren't able to get it. And then we float back from there. So I'd have the client say that statement. In CA, we call it actual affirmation. So I would, if I was the client, I would say, like, I want to belong, or I want to feel like I matter, or I want to feel safe, or whatever it is. I want to be myself. And then I would ask, like, how's your body respond to that? What sensations do you notice? And then connect with the sensations for a bit, and then float back from there.
Yep.
To an earlier time.
And if you don't have that, even just that initial ability to stay in awareness, you miss all of that. Like your therapist can be doing such great work and bringing you back to even positive memories to help you, again, resource and stay present and grounded. But if you don't know how to hold that awareness, if you don't have those skills, then you lose it.
You lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like in that, what we just talked about, we're actually doing the mind and the body. We're asking the mind, with words, what do you want that you're not getting? What's that actual affirmation? Then we ask the body how it's responding. And then we go from there to find the visual memories of those past experiences. And then once we get one, then we can start processing it with the constructed awareness way of doing it, or with EMDR or SE or hypnosis or whatever, somebody does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think going back to kind of just the awareness piece and how awareness is really the thing that creates this change. There's so many ways a client can get the results they're looking for from so, again, CBT might work for you if you find a therapist who is really attuned to you and really connected. And that's how all of these, I think, work. But I do think that there are some modalities and again, constructed awareness for me was that bridge. Like it added that piece of, I might be attuned to you in the sense that I understand the pain you're feeling. I even might know, like, from what you've told me, some of your attachment experiences, but how do I help you now connect those two pieces so that you can walk away from here feeling whole and not fragmented?
Mhm.
And there's just going to be different trainings are going to resonate better or differently with different therapists.
Well, I
Probably
saw,
just goes back to your style.
yeah, and I saw in our field, there's almost like in retaliation. I don't know if that's the right word, but like, CBT was such a big thing for so long. Like, obviously it works,
Mm-hmm.
or it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be what it is. But in response to that, the somatic therapies were created, and it's like they threw the mind out.
Yeah.
That was a big problem that I had when I was doing SE training. It's like, well, what about the mind? As a mentally oriented person, maybe I was feeling a little hurt by that. It's like, I just felt like there's this big part of the experience that's being cut off from. It's like
Yep.
we threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I agree.
I think CA is an attempt to pull it all together.
Yep.
But we're not working with thoughts in a CBT kind of way. It's almost like we took like somatic approaches to the body and applied those to the mind. So it's very much like bottom up, like you're looking at your thoughts, you're hearing your thoughts.
Yeah.
Right. Just like you would if you were looking at or hearing things that are happening externally.
Yeah. Makes sense. I think this feels like a great stopping point. And yeah, maybe just a piece of, I don't know if advice is the right word, but like a piece of something that people with chronic pain or chronic illness can kind of take away with them when they're like, if they're leaving this podcast, okay, what do I do next? Obviously, if you're a therapist, then go sign up for Tyler's training. But
Yeah.
if you're not a therapist and you just have chronic pain, where can people find therapists who are being trained under constructed awareness?
Well, I would say you should probably go see Destiny.
I'm in Georgia. Yeah, taking clients in Georgia.
You can always reach out to info@constructedawareness.com and ask for me, and we'll see if we can find somebody in your area that works for with pain and with CA.
Yeah.
We don't have like a
Directory or anything.
directory, yeah, thanks, directory or anything like that at this point. But I would say that you can get better. There is hope. I'm sorry for all the ways that people have told you that this is your fault and you're doing this to yourself. I know that that's ridiculous. Nobody would do this to themselves,
Yeah.
It's just your nervous system is confused, probably because it's overwhelmed from past experiences. And, even if you couldn't get in with somebody with CA, there's other approaches like SE, EMDR that could be really helpful for this. EMDR, I did a lot of pain work with EMDR for a long time. If it's the result of sensitization, well, the D in EMDR is desensitization. So there you go. So there are options out there that could fall outside of just the traditional medical or more like holistic body focused approaches. I would say, and this is something my friend Matt told me once, he said, if you've tried the tissue related, approaches and they didn't work, then it's probably not a tissue problem. Right. And so that was a good point. I liked hearing that. And so if the stuff that you tried hasn't worked, give the mental health stuff a try, because like I said, I've seen it work really well in the past.
Thank you.
So I appreciate this.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much. And we'll be in touch.
Awesome.
All right. Bye.
A few extra things to note here. Therapists, if you want to join Tyler's next constructed awareness training, it's May 6th through 7th and 20th through 21st in 2022. You can use the code Destiny Winters for $200 off. It's all virtual, so it doesn't matter where you are. You can attend it anywhere. And he also holds free monthly consultation meetings for therapists, and you don't need to be trained in constructed awareness to attend, so definitely check that out. And for everyone, Tyler gave some really good book recommendations at the end here that got cut out. So if you want to read more about the science behind pain, check out Unlearning Your Pain by Dr. Howard Schubner. And I also really like Freedom from Pain by Peter Levine. Taylor also has a 2-day training for anyone who would be interested to purchase this on his website. It's called What Are You Noticing Now? Integrating EMDR and Constructed Awareness. That'll be on July 22nd and 23rd. If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need in order to better absorb the same lesson. Lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do so if you found this episode helpful.